Webs have started shooting out of his hands, and who knows from where else. As he's swinging through the streets, pigeons are getting stuck to his chest. Even people who try to get into his head can't seem to get inside anymore. So what exactly is all this, and how does Spider-Man's powers actually work? We've never really talked about it before, have we? So why delay a good deed? Buckle up, because I'm about to take you down a path that's going to feel a little gross, but it's also necessary if you really want to understand Spider-Man. If we look at this shot, it seems clear that something has happened to Peter here, or something happened just before this. After that, his powers started mutating, or his body began to transform, and we even saw him swinging in the trailer wearing these same clothes. It feels as if he's undergone some kind of change, but what exactly is that change? To answer that, we first need to trace Peter Parker's origins. In the MCU, Peter Parker's origin story was never fully shown, and there wasn't much clarity given about it. The only thing we're told is during a conversation with Ned when Peter casually mentions that he was bitten by a spider. Ned then says he wishes a spider would bite him too, but Peter replies that spider is dead. Even though we never actually see the incident on screen, this dialogue strongly suggests that the MCU follows the comic book origin fairly closely. Now, we all know what happens in the comics. Peter Parker goes to witness a scientific experiment where he's bitten by a spider. It is said to be a radioactive spider. But I tried digging a little deeper into this, and I actually found out that the spider had received a massive dose of radiation. The dose was so extreme that it turned out to be lethal for the spider. But just before it died, it bit Peter. And it also bit someone else, though that isn't important right now. The important thing is that when the spider received that lethal dose of radiation, it bit Peter and gave him his powers. So, was that radiation entirely responsible for Spider-Man's powers? The answer is no. In the Marvel Comics, it's explained that before the spider received that lethal dose of radiation, it had already been exposed to smaller amounts of radiation over time. Because of that, it had already begun mutating. And if you compare that with Peter's transformation, everything fits perfectly. The spider was exposed to radiation, mutated a little, then continued mutating gradually until it finally received the lethal dose. The exact same thing seems to be happening with Peter. He started as a normal human, gained spider powers, and now he's continuing to mutate. And if we're lucky, we might actually get to see Man-Spider in this movie. Now, we keep saying Peter is transforming and mutating, but what exactly does that mutation mean? As far as I understand it, all of Peter's powers are continuing to evolve. His body, his internal organs, and his entire physiology are gradually changing. The biggest evidence of this is his organic webbing, something we've never seen in Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man had organic webs right from the beginning. So the question Andrew and Tom asked Tobey,
does it just come out of your wrists, or does it come out of anywhere else?
Only the wrists.
Well, Tobey couldn't really explain it. But I can. In the comics, Peter's body actually synthesizes the web fluid on its own, but it doesn't happen inside his body. It happens here. Around both of his wrists are special glands that produce a silk-like liquid. And if you look closely, you'll notice something else on his wrists. These are stingers. Peter hardly ever used them in the comics. The only memorable time I can think of is when he used them against Morlun, and even then it was an involuntary response. As soon as Morlun got close, Peter instinctively jumped at him, and these stingers shot out from his wrists and stabbed him. Whether we'll see them in the movie or not, I have no idea, but if they do appear, it'll be absolutely awesome. Peter doesn't consciously control the production of his organic webbing either. It's kind of involuntary. Think of it like this. When you drink a lot of water, your body naturally produces urine. You don't consciously decide to make it happen. That's exactly how Peter's web synthesis works. He can consciously aim, shoot, and control the webs with his will and hand movements, but the production itself happens automatically. Of course, the amount of webbing he produces depends on how much he eats. The better his nutrition, the more web fluid his body can synthesize, allowing him to use his webs for a much longer time. But if he's been fighting for days without eating properly, it starts affecting his web production as well. Now, we've actually witnessed this kind of transformation in the comics twice before. The first time is a fascinating story. At that point, Peter Parker is happily living his life with Mary Jane, and everyone already knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Then a new character enters his life, Spider-Queen. Yes, the same Spider-Queen we talked about in another video, the one Jackal was working for. She possesses the ability to control people telepathically. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, it gets even crazier.
So here's what actually happens. During World War II, around the same time the government was creating Captain America through the Super Soldier program, another secret project was approved just before Steve Rogers was frozen. This program focused on female soldiers. The goal was to give them extraordinary powers by combining human DNA with the genetic traits of various animals. One of the test subjects was Anna Soria. Scientists experimented on Anna Soria by merging human and animal genetics, but they couldn't determine whether the experiment had actually worked. Then, Captain America disappeared into the ice, the project was abandoned, and Anna was locked away. But because she had already developed powers, she eventually escaped. Years later, she arrives in New York and begins controlling people telepathically. Among everyone, Peter Parker becomes her primary target, and for a very specific reason. She wants to mate with him. Yes, exactly what you're thinking. The source of her powers is that she's telepathically connected to insects. Because Peter possesses spider powers, she feels an unusually strong connection to him. The first time she meets Peter, she kisses him. That single kiss triggers a horrifying transformation inside Peter. At first, Peter has no idea what's happening. His mind is still completely devoted to Mary Jane, and he knows Spider-Queen is dangerous. But physically, his body begins responding to her against his own will. He constantly feels sick and starts vomiting. His eyes multiply, eventually becoming 8 spider-like eyes. No matter how hard he tries, he keeps finding himself drawn back to Spider-Queen. Eventually, it's revealed that every time Peter returns to her, his body is mutating further. By the end of the transformation, he literally becomes a giant spider. Then comes the biggest twist. Spider-Queen didn't simply kiss Peter to attract him or mutate him. Peter was transforming because that kiss had actually made him pregnant. Yes, seriously. Spider-Queen's offspring were growing inside him. When Peter, now trapped inside the giant spider's body, realizes what's happening, he completely loses control. The creature goes insane, thrashes around wildly, and then dies on the spot. Moments later, the spider's body tears open and Peter emerges from inside it, completely reborn. His muscles are more developed, his body is stronger than before, and, most importantly, he gains organic webbing. These organic webs work exactly as I explained earlier. Peter's wrist glands naturally produce the web fluid, and he simply uses it whenever he needs to. The only major difference is that mechanical web fluid dissolves after about an hour, while organic webs can last for nearly a week before breaking down naturally since they're a biological product. Later on, Marvel eventually retconned this origin for Peter's organic webs, but then came another storyline involving Morlun, one of my personal favorite Spider-Man villains. Morlun pushed Peter further than anyone else ever had. He completely destroyed him, even killed him. However, when Peter was reborn, he encountered the Other, a mysterious cosmic spider totem entity that exists across the multiverse. This entity chooses a single spider person to inherit its power. Peter became its chosen host. The Other essentially told him, leave behind your human side and embrace the spider within. Peter accepted. As a result, he gained organic webbing once again, functioning almost exactly the same way as before, but this time his transformation went much deeper than just his webs.
Now, if you pay close attention to that transformation scene in the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer, especially the swinging sequence, I feel that's when Peter's mutation has already been triggered and he's fully starting to access his new powers. But there's another scene that interests me even more.
It feels like that's the moment Peter truly learns how to use his organic webs for the first time, or at least the first time he uses them willingly. Throughout that entire sequence, Peter is being overwhelmed by the hand ninjas. He still has his mechanical web shooters, but they aren't helping him at all. He's getting completely beaten down. Then, in the final moment, we see him on his knees. Suddenly, the color of his eyes changes. He leaps onto the ceiling, and when he drops back down, he unleashes what looks like an enormous web tornado. That scene really stood out to me because even in the comics, we've never seen Peter use his organic webs with that level of efficiency, and I honestly don't think his transformation is going to stop at organic webbing. In the comics, when Peter receives the powers of the other, even his wall-crawling abilities evolve. Now, how do Peter's sticking powers actually work? I've explained this before. It's not that tiny hairs grow out of his hands. That was simply Sam Raimi's interpretation for the movies. In the comics, Peter's powers work at the molecular level. The surface of his skin can manipulate the attractive forces between molecules. In simple terms, when Peter touches a wall, he can alter the molecular attraction between his skin and the wall's surface, causing himself to stick to it. When his powers evolve, that ability is no longer limited to just his hands. His entire body gains the same capability. I even mentioned this in my trailer breakdown. There's a scene where Peter enters a building to rescue a little girl. To escape, he needs both hands free, so instead of carrying her, he simply sticks her to his back using his enhanced adhesion powers and climbs out. There's another interesting detail that the comics barely mention. Peter can even use this ability on his mask. If someone ever tries to rip off his mask while his hands are tied, they won't be able to. That's because Peter literally bonds the molecules of the mask to his own skin, making it impossible to remove unless he wants it to come off. That's such a fascinating concept, and it's something we've never really seen explored in live action. But honestly, as exciting as all these physical changes are, there's one upgrade I'm looking forward to even more: the spider sense. Spider-Man's spider sense is one of his most unique abilities, yet it's been heavily underutilized in the MCU. In fact, during Captain America's Civil War and even his first solo film, it was barely acknowledged. Yet in the comics, it's arguably Peter's greatest power. Spider sense allows Peter to detect danger before it happens. Whenever there's a threat nearby, he feels a tingling sensation at the back of his head. The movies jokingly called it the Peter tingle. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of that name, but the basic idea is correct. That tingling doesn't just warn him that danger exists, it tells him how dangerous it is, where it's coming from, how far away it is, and sometimes even what kind of threat he's facing. All Peter has to do is focus.
What's even more incredible is that Peter doesn't always have to consciously react. Even if he's asleep, his body can automatically respond to danger through his spider sense and protect him before he even realizes what's happening. That's just how powerful this ability is. This is also why Peter's fighting style is so unique. Imagine he's fighting 6 different enemies at once. While he's focused on the person in front of him, someone else attacks from behind. Normally, anyone would get hit, but not Peter. His spider sense allows his body to move instinctively. He can continue throwing a punch at the opponent in front of him while simultaneously dodging the attack from behind, all without consciously thinking about it. His body simply reacts on its own. The only way he'd actually get hit is if he deliberately resisted that instinct and stopped himself from moving. That's how extraordinary spider sense really is. Now imagine if this ability gets upgraded. Remember the storyline where Peter mutates, transforms into a giant spider, and is eventually reborn? After that rebirth, his spider sense evolves as well. It becomes far more than just a warning system. Peter can actually visualize events happening around him. Even if he's far away, he can mentally witness what's happening in another location, almost as if he's seeing it through a special sensory filter. It's like an incredibly advanced version of radar. The reason this becomes possible is that Peter's spider sense develops a psychic connection with insects. His mind becomes linked with spiders, ants, cockroaches, and countless other insects. Through them, he can sense what's happening in places he can't physically see. He can even understand the signals they're communicating. This becomes the next stage of his spider sense. Now just imagine if the movie gives us its own version of that power. That would be absolutely incredible. But then another question comes up.
Why is Peter transforming in the first place? Who's actually triggering this mutation? Based on everything I've seen so far, I still think the trailers are doing an amazing job of hiding the real story. For once, Sony has cut a trailer that successfully keeps the main plot a secret. We already know a few pieces of the puzzle. Sadie Sink's character could possibly be Jean. The Punisher is expected to appear. Hulk might also be involved. We also know there are several lower-level Spider-Man villains in the movie. But the main villain? They're still hiding that person. The trailers keep showing body-hopping and mind-hopping abilities, making it look like Jean is responsible for everything. But I've said this before, Jean's powers simply don't work like that. So either Sadie Sink isn't actually Jean, or if she is Jean, then someone else is responsible for all the body-hopping we've been seeing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is who I believe the real main villain is. Something is definitely going to happen to Peter that triggers this entire mutation. At first, I thought it might be Scorpion's sting. That seemed the most obvious explanation. But a newly released clip completely changed my mind. During Peter's fight with Scorpion, Scorpion attacks him and Peter actually calls him Scorpion. Then he says something that strongly suggests the person inside that body isn't really Scorpion anymore. That completely changes the context of the fight. Yes, the body belongs to Scorpion, but the mind inside appears to belong to someone else. Which means that whatever body-hopping entity is operating behind the scenes may actually be responsible for every single fight and action sequence we've seen in the trailers.
Whatever the truth turns out to be, there's one thing I really hope they don't do. I seriously hope Peter's mutation isn't caused by the whole pregnancy storyline from the comics. I do not want to see Tom Holland's Peter Parker getting pregnant. That's just a terrible mental image. Hopefully, Marvel takes a completely different approach. Based on everything we've seen in the trailers and teaser clips, here's how I think the chain of events will play out. Peter attends MJ's party, where he sees her with someone else. Naturally, he's heartbroken and frustrated. Somewhere after that, he encounters a mysterious character or entity, and I believe that encounter is what triggers his transformation. Afterward, we see Peter looking bruised and beaten up with blood on his face. Then, almost immediately after that, his new powers begin to awaken. The next morning, he wakes up with fully developed organic webbing. I went through every trailer and teaser frame by frame, and interestingly, they never actually show the exact moment when Peter gains these powers. Thankfully, they've managed to keep that scene completely hidden. At least they're still saving a few surprises for the movie. That's why I wanted to make this video. We hadn't really talked in detail about how Peter's powers actually work, where his organic webs come from, or how this new transformation could completely change his abilities in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Bye-bye, take care, and thank you so much for watching.